Welcome to Smart Architectural Programming. Exploring Python, how to list files in a directory with multiple examples.
Welcome to another video on Smart Architectural Programming. My name is Mohammed and coding alongside me is
George, and today we'll be going over how to list files in a directory. Did you take over, Mohammed?
So this specific topic about listing files in a directory is part of something we call file system operations. And it is a relatively niche segment of importance. It's not very important to learn per se, but when you are developing in a large team or with a large company, it might become an essential component that you might want to learn. But it's very niche, so not a lot of programmers, even at expert level, are familiar with them, and that is why you'll see a lot of people looking up information about file system operations like listing directories, deleting files, so on and so forth. So in this case, like with any other video that we do on Python or Python related concepts, we particularly focus on one thing, and that is we go over multiple examples to do the same thing. And just as a reminder, we do this to make sure that we may make you familiar with not only the code the code that is written out to do these processes, but at the same time, it familiarizes you with other parallel concepts that you might not know, you might have missed, or those concepts that we consider are important, relatively important at the fundamental level for you to be familiar with when you're working with Python. So in this case, we'll go over 4 examples, and you'll see successively the upgradation of difficulty or utility in these pieces of code. So for example, the first, if you look at my screen right now, the first code here that we're dealing with is using the operating system library, the OS library in Python. If you're not familiar with the OS library, pause the video because this is a very essential library that you need to learn in regards to Python if you want to deal with your computer environment from your Python code. So it's a very essential library. I'm not going to go into details about that because you can simply pull up the documentation for the OS library and understand more about it. Then I define a function from line 3 onwards in this code. And within that function, I create a variable called files on line 4 and use the os.listdir directory, right? That's the function that I'm using from OS library. And this listdir function, once a path is given to it to a specific directory, that's what I'm referring to when I'm talking about a path. It goes to that path, identifies all the file names, and saves them, right? And from line 5 to 6, it's a simple for loop I'm using to print all of the data that is saved in the files variable after using the listdir path. So this is probably the most simplest method that you can use. And then on line 9, I run this function and feed in whatever path as a string that I want to for a directory that I want to go to and list out all the files for, and it should get us a list of files printed on the console. With that out of the way, we'll move on to the next concept related to identifying or listing out all the files within our directory. So that if we're going to use an exactly similar method as before, we're going to use the OS library and we're going to use the listdir function within that library. But this specific example, if you note, is a slightly more complicated. Rather, it's much more esoteric than the previous one. The previous example was very simple. And the reason for that complication is because this specific code uses a concept called list comprehension. And list comprehension is a very a technical concept in Python. You might not have heard of it, but if not, you need to hear of it. You need to learn about it because at higher levels in Python programming, it is a very essential concept that you must understand if you want to become someone who is really good at their craft. So basically, I'm not going to go into too much details about list comprehension because this is something that we've covered in great detail in a separate video. You can look that up on our channel, and more than likely we'll have that within our description below. So you can just click there and see that specific video, because that is very, very important concept for people who want to pursue Python as a career in their lives. Now, again, just like before, we create a function from line 3 onward. And on line 4, like before, we create a variable called files that should supposedly save uh, all the files that we get from os.listed here. Now, the difference you'll notice is that all of this is in square brackets. That's list comprehension. And there's certain conditions that we've put in. Like we have created a for loop file for file in. Basically, that's a for loop that we created for the result that we'll get for lister. And if file dot ends with extension, we've created another function where we're going to use a function called ends with to check if the certain file ends with a certain extension. Then we place it within this list. So basically, simply, we've put in a filter system using list comprehension. So we're not just taking every single file in the directory. Rather, we are specifying exactly what files we need with what specific conditions, and then we're saving that within the files. And then on line 5 and 6, we're doing the same thing as previously. We're just printing all of that out.